A dark line moves along a riverbank before dawn. It is October in a Kentucky valley nobody has heard of, where the fog sits so thick over the pasture that the cattle have not yet lifted their heads. The Redstone River is running low and brown and patient. It has been eating this bank for 10,000 years. It does not know what is coming. A wheelbarrow squeaks somewhere in the mist. Closer now, past the fence line, past a locust stump, past a place a woman used to hang out sheets to dry when there was still a woman in the house. A wooden handle, a blistered palm, a spool of red yarn. An 18-year-old girl kneels down in the mud and presses a dead stick into the ground. She does not know it yet, but 3 miles up the ridge road another engine has started. A canvas coat, a wool cap, boots that cost more than most men in the valley spend on their trucks, and a war that has been waiting 33 years to find her. The mist came down over Barefoot County the way it always did in October. Thick, wet, clinging to the low places where the Redstone River bent through the pasture land like slow gray water in a slower gray world. The girl walked out of the barn at 4 in the morning, which was 2 hours before the sun would think about rising. 2 hours before her father would come down the stairs with his boots in his hand. 2 hours before anyone in the county would notice she was gone. Her name was Sorrel Kinney. She was 18 years old. She had lost her mother 4 years ago, and she had been trying to finish something her mother started ever since. She was carrying a wheelbarrow full of dead sticks. That's what they looked like. Dead sticks. Long, thin ones, cut fresh from the willow mother tree behind the old milking shed. Bundled tight with twine, she'd braided herself from baler cord because she couldn't afford proper garden twine and wouldn't ask her father for the money. The wheelbarrow squeaked. She had meant to oil it. She had meant to do a lot of things. Sorrel pushed it down the slope, past the fence line, past the place where her mother used to hang out sheets to dry when there was still a mother in the house, past the old locust stump where she'd cracked her elbow open at 7 years old and gotten a scar shaped like a comma. The grass was slick. The fog was thick. The world was quiet in that specific way farm country goes quiet before dawn. Not peaceful. Not exactly. More like something was holding its breath. She reached the riverbank. The redstone was running low that morning, October low, slow and brown and shallow enough you could see the stones on the bottom where they curved past the willow bend. But Sorrel knew this river. She'd measured it. She'd driven cedar stakes into the bank 3 years ago, and she'd gone out every third Sunday since to record where the water met the wood. 30 centimeters a year. That's how much the bank was losing. On average. Some years less, some years more, but always losing. Do the math. In 20 years, the Kinney farm would be smaller by a third. In 40 years, there wouldn't be a farm at all. She set the wheelbarrow down, took out her father's spade, the good one with the ash handle her grandmother had oiled every spring since 1948, and she started to dig. Not deep. Willows don't need deep. Willows need mud and patience, and someone stupid enough to plant them in October when everyone else is already turning their thoughts to the tobacco barns and the first frost and the price of hay. The first cutting went in at exactly 5:03. She marked it with a piece of red yarn. Then she stepped 45 centimeters to the left, and she planted another. She would plant 112 that morning before the school bus came. Her hands would bleed before she was done. She would not stop, because there was a war coming to Barefoot County, and Sorrel Kinney was the only person in the whole valley who had figured out how to fight it. Mariah Thistlewood saw her first, which was fitting. Mariah saw everything first. She was 71 years old, and she lived alone in the yellow house on the county road, and she woke up at 4:30 every morning to drink her coffee on the porch and watch the fog burn off the pasture. Mariah was on her second cup when she noticed the shape moving along the Kinney riverbank. She lifted her binoculars, the ones her late husband Kellen had used for birdwatching before the emphysema took him in '83. She adjusted the focus, and she saw the Kinney girl, bent over, working, pushing something into the ground. "Well, I'll be," Mariah said. "To nobody." She lowered the binoculars, She lifted them again. The girl was still there, still working. Mariah watched for a long time, until the sun came up, until the school bus rumbled past her mailbox, and the girl straightened up and wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist and started running toward the county road. Mariah put the binoculars down. She sat with her cold coffee for another 20 minutes. Then she got up, went inside, picked up the phone, and she called every woman on her prayer chain. Rennick Kinney did not know his daughter was gone until he sat down at the kitchen table at 6:15 and found the coffee already made and a plate of biscuits under a clean flour sack towel, and his newspaper folded neatly beside his cup. He knew what that meant. His daughter was already gone. She had gotten up before him. Again. He didn't say anything. He never said anything about it. He drank his coffee. He ate his biscuits. He read the crop report from the front page of the county paper. And he told himself that whatever Sorrel was doing at 4 a.m. was not his business as long as her chores got done and her grades stayed up, and she came home before dark. That's what he told himself. What he actually felt was something different. What he actually felt was a small cold hand at the back of his throat, because Elspeth used to do the same thing. His wife, his late wife. She used to wake up before dawn and slip out of bed and go somewhere. She never said where. She would come back with her hair wet from the fog and her boots muddy, and her eyes very calm and very quiet, and she would kiss him on the temple and start breakfast. Rennick had never asked her where she went. He had thought there would be time to ask. He had been wrong. He folded the newspaper. He put his cup in the sink. He put on his jacket and his hat, and he walked out to the barn, and he did not look toward the riverbank because he was afraid of what he might see there, which was his wife. Come back in the shape of their daughter. At school, Sorrel sat in the back of Mrs. Hollister's biology class, and she watched the clock. Not because she was bored, because she was calculating. 347 more cuttings in the wheelbarrow, 45 centimeters between each one, which meant 156 meters of new plantings if she worked another full week, which meant she was on track, which meant she might actually finish the north stretch before the first hard frost locked the ground, which meant. She stopped calculating. Her palm was throbbing. She looked down. There was blood soaking through the strip of duct tape she'd wrapped around it before homeroom. Sorrel put her hand in her lap. Under the desk, Mrs. Hollister was talking about mitosis. Sorrel was thinking about Willows. Specifically, she was thinking about the diagram in her grandmother's notebook. The one with the little arrows showing how 2 green cuttings could be crossed and lashed together while they were still alive, and how they would grow into each other. Fuse. Become one plant with a shared root system and a woven trunk. The technique had a name. Her grandmother had written it in the margin in her tight slanted hand. Living hinge. Sorrel had read that phrase 1,000 times. She still didn't know how to make one. The bell rang. She stood up. She walked out into the hallway. She kept her hand in her pocket. She did not look at anyone. She did not want to be seen. That was Monday. By Wednesday, the whole town knew. Mariah's prayer chain had done its work, which was less about prayer and more about information. By Wednesday morning, every woman over 60 in Barefoot County knew that the Kinney girl was out on the riverbank before dawn planting sticks in the mud. By Wednesday afternoon, their husbands knew. By Wednesday evening, it had reached the feed store on Main Street, which was where the men of Barefoot County went to gossip in the way that men gossip. Slowly, over cups of bad coffee, pretending they were talking about something else. "Kinney girl," said Emmett Barlow, who was leaning on the counter. "Heard about it," said Denton Reeves, who was leaning on the doorframe. "Sticks. That's what I heard. In October. That's what I heard." Emmett shook his head. He was 73. He had known Rennick Kinney's father. He had known Rennick's grandfather. He had opinions about the Kinneys. "Girl's got her mother's ideas," he said. Denton nodded slowly. "That's what I was going to say." Nobody said what they meant. What they meant was that Elspeth Kinney had been strange. Not bad strange. Not crazy strange. Just the kind of woman who read books at the kitchen table and asked too many questions at the extension office meetings, and once wrote a letter to the editor of the county paper about erosion. They had liked her. They had been polite to her. And when she died, they had shown up at the funeral with covered dishes, and they had said the right things, but they had all known she was strange. And now the girl was strange too. The bell over the door jingled. Ward Callister walked in. Every man in the feed store stood up a little straighter, because that's what men did when Ward walked in. He was 52 years old. He was 6'3". He wore a canvas coat and a wool cap and a pair of boots that had cost more than most men in the county spent on their trucks. He owned 1,200 acres. He sat on the county water board. He was Sorrel Kinney's oldest friend in the world. "Boys," Ward said, because he had known most of them since he was 15. "Ward," said Emmett. "Ward," said Denton. Ward walked to the counter. He asked for a pound of nails and a bag of chicken feed. He paid in cash. He did not mention the Kinney girl, but when he was walking back to his truck, he looked across the road, toward the Redstone, toward the far bend where the Kinney land started. He stood in the parking lot for a long time. Then he got in his truck and he drove away. That night at supper, Rennick set his fork down. He had been eating in silence, which was normal. He had been eating slowly, which was normal. But then he set his fork down. Sorrel looked up. Her grandmother Fiora looked up. The kitchen went very still. "Girl," Rennick said. Sorrel waited. "What are you doing down at the river?" It was not a question. Not the way he said it. He said it flat and heavy, the way he said everything. Sorrel took a breath. "I'm planting willows." "Why?" "To hold the bank." Rennick looked at her. His eyes were the color of iron. They had been kinder once. Sorrel remembered them being kinder. But she had been 14 when her mother died, and it had been 4 years, and she was starting to have trouble remembering exactly what her father's face had looked like when he was still happy. "That's men's work," he said. "Yes, sir." "And you're not a man." "No, sir." "And I didn't give you leave to do it." "No, sir." Fiora Kinney set her spoon down, very carefully. She was 79 years old. She weighed 96 pounds. She had a spine like a fence post. "Rennick," she said. Rennick did not look at his mother. "Rennick," she said again. "Mama, that's your daughter. I know who she is. Then talk to her like she is." The room got quiet again. Sorrel looked down at her plate. She had not eaten. She was not hungry. She could feel her heartbeat in her bandaged hand. Rennick picked up his fork. He did not tell her to stop, but he did not tell her to keep going either. He just ate, in silence, until his plate was clean. Then he pushed back from the table and he took his hat off the hook, and he walked out into the yard and he stood in the cold, looking at the stars for a very long time. Sorrel got up. She started clearing the plates. Her grandmother caught her wrist, gentle, firm. "Come with me," Fiora said. She led Sorrel into the back bedroom, the one that had been Sorrel's mother's sewing room before it became Sorrel's mother's dying room, and then became nobody's room at all. Fiora went to the closet. She reached up on tiptoe. She took down a shoebox. She set it on the bed. "I have been meaning to give you this," Fiora said. "I have been waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you to start." Sorrel opened the box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, bundled with a piece of pale blue ribbon. Every letter was in her mother's handwriting. Sorrel sat down on the bed. She could not stand up any longer. "Read the last one," Fiora said. Sorrel's hands were shaking. She untied the ribbon. She found the last letter, dated 3 weeks before her mother died. The paper was thin. The ink was a little smudged. Her mother had written it in the hospital. "Mama, I want to teach Sorrel about the willows, but I am not going to have time. Please teach her for me. Do not let Rennick know until she is strong enough, because he will not allow it if he knows it came from me. He is going to try to protect her from everything I loved. Please, please, please give her this." Sorrel read it twice. She read it 3 times. She put the letter down very carefully on the bed, as if it might break. She looked up at her grandmother. Fiora was not crying. Fiora Kinney did not cry, but her eyes were wet. "Grandma," Sorrel said. "Yes." "Was this her idea? The Willows? Was this hers?" Fiora nodded once. "And your great-grandmother's before her, and her mother's before that. All the way back to Somerset. All the way back to a village called Athelney, where they wove willow fences to keep the river from taking the fields. My mother taught me. I would have taught your mother. She learned it anyway. She always learned things anyway. She was going to teach you. But she couldn't. But she couldn't." Sorrel looked down at the letter. She was crying now, silently, the way she had learned to cry after her mother died, because her father could not stand the sound. "Grandma," she said. "Yes. I don't know how to make a living hinge." Fiora sat down on the bed beside her granddaughter. She took Sorrel's bandaged hand, very gently, very slowly. "I will show you," she said. "When?" "Tomorrow, before dawn, at the willow mother tree. Wear your good gloves, and bring a sharp knife." She squeezed Sorrel's hand. "You are going to finish what your mother started. You are going to finish what my mother started. You are going to finish what a woman in Athelney started 300 years ago, when she looked at a river taking her fields, and she said no. Not this year. Not while I have hands." Sorrel could not speak. She nodded. That was enough. Winter came early that year. The first hard frost was on the 3rd of November, which was 2 weeks before Sorrel had planned for. She was ready anyway. She was ready because her grandmother had been showing up at the riverbank every dawn for 3 weeks, with a thermos of coffee and a paring knife and a piece of chalk to draw diagrams on the flat gray stones. Fiora Kinney at 79 could not bend down to plant cuttings. Her hips would not allow it. But she could sit on a folding camp stool with a wool blanket over her knees, and she could point, and she could correct, and she could say things like, "No child that one wants to grow south, turn it around, and the one you planted on Tuesday is going to die. So pull it and try again, and good, good, good. Yes, that one is going to hold." By the 3rd of November, Sorrel had put in 411 cuttings. She had also made her first living hinge. 2 cuttings, crossed, notched where they touched, lashed together with strips of raw willow bark her grandmother had shown her how to strip. Not too tight, not too loose, just enough to hold them still while they figured out they were supposed to become one plant. Fiora had inspected it from the camp stool. She had said only one thing: "Your mother would have kissed you for that." Sorrel had cried. Sorrel had been crying a lot lately. She did not tell anyone. She cried into the wind at the riverbank where the sound got carried away. She cried into her pillow where nobody could hear her. She cried in the barn where the cows didn't care. She cried because she was tired and her hands hurt, and she was carrying the ghost of her mother and the memory of her grandmother's whole line of women all the way back to Athelney, and it was too much for one 18-year-old girl. But she did not stop, because if she stopped, they would all have died for nothing, and she was not going to allow that. Ward Callister came to see her on a Sunday afternoon. The temperature was hovering at 28. Sorrel was working alone. Her grandmother had a cold and had been ordered by Rennick to stay in bed. Sorrel was crouched at the edge of the water, pressing the last cutting of the morning into the mud. She heard the truck before she saw it. She stood up. Ward parked at the top of the slope. He got out slowly. He walked down the hill slowly. He was wearing his good boots and his canvas coat, and he had a paper bag in his hand. "Sorrel." "Mr. Callister." He held out the bag. "Muffins. Idella made them. She sent me over." Sorrel took the bag. She said thank you. She stood there with the muffins in her cold hand, and she waited. because Ward had not driven 3 miles across the county on a Sunday afternoon to deliver muffins. Ward looked at the riverbank. He looked at the row of cuttings. Neat, straight, marked with red yarn every 10 stakes. He whistled softly. "That's a lot of work, honey." "Yes, sir." "How many you got in the ground?" 411. He whistled again. "That's more than I would have guessed." "There will be more." Ward was quiet for a long time. Then he said her name again. "Sorrel." "Yes, sir." "I love you like a daughter. You know that." "Yes, sir. I stood beside your daddy when your mama got sick. I sat in that hospital with him. I held him up at the funeral. I love this family." "Yes, sir." "So I am going to tell you something. And I'm going to tell you, not because I want to hurt you, but because I want to save your daddy from watching you fail." Sorrel did not answer. Ward gestured at the willows. "This isn't going to work, honey. I know you think it will. I know somebody told you it would. But the Redstone doesn't care about sticks. She's been eating this bank since before your grandfather was born. She's going to keep eating it until we put a proper concrete wall along her, which is what the county is going to do. Federal money, $4 million, starts in the spring." Sorrel felt something cold in her stomach. She had not known about the money. She had not known it was that much. She had not known it was starting so soon. "Mr. Callister." "Yes, honey." "How much of that concrete would go along our land?" Ward looked at her. He was silent for a long moment. "About 600 meters, honey. From the fence line down to the big bend." "Right where I'm planting." "Right where you're planting." Sorrel looked at the river. The river looked back at her. Slow, brown, patient. The Redstone had been patient for 10,000 years. Sorrel could be patient too. "Mr. Callister." "Yes." "Thank you for the muffins." Ward looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded, slowly, sadly. The way a man nods when he has said everything he came to say and it has not worked. He walked back up the hill. He got in his truck. He drove away. Sorrel stood at the riverbank with the paper bag in her hand. She did not eat the muffins. She threw them in the river. She was not proud of that. Later she would be ashamed of it. Later she would apologize to Idella Callister in her heart, if not out loud. But that day she threw the muffins in the river, and she watched them float away, and then she went back to planting. The letter came the next Tuesday. It was on county letterhead. It was signed by the chairman of the Barefoot County Water and Erosion Control Board. It was addressed to Sorrel Kinney. Rennick read it at the kitchen table. He read it once. He read it twice. Then he laid it face down and he pushed it across the table to his daughter. Sorrel picked it up. The letter informed the Kinney family that a federal soil conservation project had been approved for the Redstone River corridor. Construction of a reinforced concrete stream bank stabilization system would commence on April 1st. The affected parcels included the entire river frontage of the Kinney farm. Property owners were required to clear the affected zone of all vegetation and structures by March 15th. Failure to comply would result in fines and possible removal at owner expense. Sorrel read the letter twice. She set it down. She looked at her father. Rennick was watching her. "Well?" he said. Sorrel did not answer. "Well," he said again. "That's that, isn't it?" Sorrel folded the letter along its original creases. She folded it very slowly, very neatly. She put it back in the envelope. She stood up. "Sit down," Rennick said. She sat down. "Girl." "Yes, sir." "You heard the letter." "I heard the letter." "You know what it means." "I know what it means." "So you are going to stop." Sorrel looked at her father across the kitchen table. She looked at his iron gray eyes. She looked at his beard, which had gone gray in the 4 years since her mother died. She looked at his hands, which were the hands of a man who had built this farm and had watched half of himself be buried in the ground with his wife. She loved her father. She loved him more than she knew how to say. "No, sir," she said. Rennick stared at her. "What?" "I said no, sir. I am not going to stop." The kitchen was silent. You could hear the clock on the wall. You could hear the wind against the window. You could hear the cows lowing in the far pasture where the fence needed mending. Sorrel Kinney stood in the doorway. She had been listening. Of course she had been listening. She said nothing. Rennick did not look at his mother. Rennick looked at his daughter for a long, long time. Then he stood up. He walked to the coat rack. He put on his jacket. He put on his hat. He walked out into the yard. He did not slam the door. He closed it, very carefully, which was somehow worse. Sorrel sat at the table. She could not move. Her grandmother came and sat down beside her. Fiora did not say anything for a long time. Then she said one thing. "That is the bravest thing you have ever done." Sorrel started to cry. Fiora took her hand. She did not tell her to stop crying. She just held her hand. Outside, the wind was picking up. Somewhere out in the pasture, Rennick Kinney was walking. He was walking without any particular direction. He was walking because he did not know what else to do, because his daughter had just refused him, and it was the first time in her life she had ever refused him, and it was the first time in his life anyone had refused him since Elspeth had said, "Let me go, my love. It is time." He walked until it was almost dark. Then he walked back to the house. He came in the kitchen. He hung up his jacket. He hung up his hat. He sat down at the table. Sorrel was still there. He looked at his daughter. He did not say he was sorry. Rennick Kinney did not say he was sorry to anyone. But he reached across the table, and he put his rough, calloused hand over hers. Just for a moment. Just for a moment. Then he took it back. He stood up. He went upstairs. And Sorrel Kinney knew. Not because he had said so. Not because he ever would. But because she had known this man all her life, and she knew what it meant when he touched her hand. He had not given her permission, but he had not forbidden her either, which for Rennick Kinney was the closest thing to a blessing he was ever going to give. The next morning, Sorrel was at the riverbank at 4. The frost was hard. Her breath came out white. The moon was still up. She unwrapped a new bundle of cuttings. She knelt down in the mud. She pressed the first one into the ground. Somewhere up on the ridge road, a truck engine started. Ward Callister was awake early too. Ward Callister was going to be very awake now. He had a war to fight. He had $4 million. He had a county board. He had the law on his side. And Sorrel Kinney had cuttings, and a grandmother, and a dead mother's letter in a shoebox, and 300 years of women behind her all the way back to a village in Somerset, where somebody had once looked at a river taking her fields and had said no. Not this year. Not while I have hands. Sorrel pressed the second cutting into the ground, then the third, then the fourth. The sun came up over Barefoot County. The mist began to burn away, and down at the river, a girl was building something the whole town would eventually come to see, something the newspapers would eventually come to photograph, something Ward Callister would eventually cross a burning cornfield to try to stop. But that was later. That was later. For now there was only the girl, and the cold, and the mud, and the willows, and the slow patient certainty of a river that had been eating the bank for 10,000 years. The river did not know it yet, but the girl was going to stop it. January came down on Barefoot County like a hammer wrapped in wet wool, the kind of cold that got into the marrow, the kind of cold that killed calves in the field and old people in their beds, and made the Redstone River freeze in strange scalloped shelves along the shallow places. Sorrel worked through it. She woke at 4. She dressed in 3 layers. She wrapped her hands in wool strips inside her canvas gloves. She walked down to the river with her wheelbarrow squeaking on the frozen ground, and she watched her willows die. Not all of them, not most of them, but enough. Enough to break her heart. The first hard freeze took 18 cuttings on the south stretch. She counted them, every one. She wrote the number in her grandmother's notebook, and she moved on. The second freeze took 31. The third one took 47. By the middle of January, she had lost 112 willows, which was 1 out of every 4, which was almost enough to make her stop. Almost. Except for the ones that lived. The ones that lived were putting down roots. Right through the frozen mud. Right down into the cold subsoil. Their bark had gone silver brown. Their tips were tight little buds that would not open until March. But they were alive. Sorrel could feel it when she pressed her palm against them, a kind of stubborn heat, a kind of not yet. She would kneel in the snow and put her cheek against a cutting and whisper, "Stay, stay, stay." She was not embarrassed about this. Nobody was watching, except somebody was. Somebody had been watching for 3 weeks. Sorrel noticed her on a Tuesday. The girl was standing on the far bank, on the Callister side, which was strange because nobody walked the Callister side of the river in January. There was nothing over there but frozen tobacco stubble and a barbed wire fence. But there she was, small, skinny, a parka 3 sizes too big, a knit cap the color of a stop sign. She was just standing there, watching. Sorrel straightened up. She waved. The girl did not wave back. Sorrel went back to her work. An hour later, she looked up. The girl was gone. The next day, she was back. Same place, same red cap, same silent staring. Sorrel did not wave this time. She just kept working. Because she had decided the girl was somebody's cousin visiting for the holidays. Somebody's niece. Somebody who would go home to Cincinnati or Louisville or wherever, and Sorrel would never see her again, except she saw her again on Thursday, and Friday, and Saturday. By Monday morning, Sorrel had had enough. She set down her spade. She wiped her hands on her jeans. She walked across the ice at the shallow bend where the water was only 3 inches deep, and the whole surface had frozen solid. The girl watched her come. The girl did not run. Sorrel climbed up the far bank. She stopped 6 feet away, close enough to see the girl's face, far enough to give her room to bolt. The girl was younger than Sorrel had thought. 14 maybe, 15 at most. Her cheeks were red from the cold. Her eyes were dark. Her lips were chapped. "Hi," Sorrel said. The girl said nothing. "I'm Sorrel." Nothing. "You want to help?" The girl blinked. "That's what I thought," Sorrel said. "Come on. I'll show you how to tie the bark strips. You got gloves." The girl looked down at her hands. She was wearing thin cotton gloves the color of nothing. Her fingertips were poking through the ends. Sorrel took off her own outer gloves. "Trade." The girl stared. "Take them," Sorrel said. "Mine are big. Yours will fit inside." The girl took the gloves. Slowly, like she thought Sorrel might snatch them back. She put them on. Then she followed Sorrel across the ice. She did not say a word. That was fine. Sorrel was used to silence. Her name was Delphi Ainsworth. Sorrel learned that from her grandmother, who had learned it from Maria Thistlewood, who had learned it from the postmaster, who knew everything about everybody in Barefoot County because he handled their mail. Delphi was 15 years old. She had been living with her great-aunt Maria for 2 years. Her parents had died in a car accident on the interstate outside Bowling Green, both of them, on the same night. When Delphi was 13, Delphi had not spoken a single word since the accident. Not one. Doctors had checked her throat. Her vocal cords worked. The muscles worked. The mechanism was fine. Something else was not fine. Maria had taken her in because there was nobody else. Maria had raised chickens and rutabagas and one bird-watching husband, and had never in her life expected to raise a grieving child. But she had done it anyway. She had done it the way farm women did things, without complaint, without pity, with a lot of cornbread. Delphi had not spoken to Maria either, for 2 years, not one word. Fiora told Sorrel this over supper. Rennick did not look up from his plate, but he was listening. Sorrel could tell by the way his fork slowed down. That poor child, Fiora said. Rennick said nothing. Sorrel said nothing either, but she was thinking about how Delphi had tied the bark strips that afternoon, how her fingers had shaken at first and then had steadied, how she had watched Sorrel demonstrate the knot 3 times and then had done it perfectly on her 4th try. She was thinking about how Delphi had not smiled, but she had not left. By the end of January, Delphi was showing up at the riverbank every day after school, 2:40 in the afternoon. Rain or freeze or snow, she would walk the 2 miles from the Thistlewood house down the county road and across the low bridge and up the muddy path to the Kinney stretch of the Redstone. She would find Sorrel. She would put on her gloves. She would start working. They did not talk. They did not need to. Sorrel would point at what needed doing. Delphi would do it. Sorrel would demonstrate a knot. Delphi would copy it. Sorrel would kneel down to press a cutting into the mud. Delphi would kneel down beside her and hold the cutting steady. It was the first friendship Sorrel had ever had. She had not known that until she noticed it. She had gone to school with the same 24 girls for 12 years, and she had considered maybe 11 of them her friends, but none of them had ever come and worked in the mud beside her for 3 hours in January. None of them had ever come at all. Delphi came. Delphi did not speak, but Delphi came. That counted for more than talking. Rennick started coming to the riverbank in February, not to help, just to watch. He would stand at the top of the slope with his arms crossed over his chest and his hat pulled low, and he would watch the 2 girls work. He would stand there for maybe 20 minutes. Then he would walk away. He never said anything. Sorrel would feel his eyes on her back. She would not turn around. She would keep working. Because she had learned that with her father, you had to pretend not to see him if you wanted him to keep coming. If you looked at him, he would leave. If you looked away, he might stay. Some days he brought coffee, 2 thermoses. He would leave them on top of the fence post at the top of the slope. He would walk away without saying anything. The coffee would be hot. Sorrel would carry 1 thermos to Delphi. They would drink standing up, steam rising off the mugs into the cold air. Fiora would watch this from the kitchen window. Fiora would not say anything about it either. There were some things in the Kinney family that did not require saying. The trouble started on a Thursday morning in March. Sorrel walked down to the riverbank at 4:30. The mist was so thick she could not see the river until she was 10 feet from it. She had her wheelbarrow, her spade, her spool of jute twine, her flashlight. She got to the edge of her stretch of plantings. She stopped. She lifted the flashlight. She swept the beam along the row. She swept it again, and her stomach dropped, because 43 willows were gone. Not dead, not withered, not blown over. Gone. Pulled up by the roots. Tossed. She could see them in the beam of her flashlight, scattered in the shallow water along the bend, their pale roots showing like the underbelly of a fish. Somebody had done this. Sorrel stood there with her flashlight shaking in her hand. She looked at the mud around the plantings. Tire tracks, deep ones, from a truck, a heavy one. The tread was wide and the spacing was wide, and the tracks came in from the county road and looped through her planting rows and went back out. Whoever had done this had done it in the last 3 hours. Whoever had done this had waited until after midnight. Whoever had done this had known what they were doing. Sorrel walked back up to the house. She did not run. She did not cry. She walked. She was very calm, which was not the same as being okay. She was not okay. She was so far from okay that she had gone all the way around to the other side of okay and had come out somewhere quiet and cold and terrible. She went into the kitchen. Her father was drinking his coffee. Her grandmother was making biscuits. Sorrel took off her muddy boots. She hung up her jacket. She walked to the sink. She washed her hands. She turned around. "Somebody drove a truck through my willows last night," she said. The kitchen went silent. Rennick set down his cup. "How many?" he said. 43. Rennick stood up. He put on his coat, his hat, his boots. He walked out the door. Sorrel followed him. Fiora followed them both. They walked down to the river in silence. When they got to the riverbank, Rennick knelt down in the mud and he touched the tire tracks. Then he stood up and he walked along the destroyed row, and he counted for himself. 43. He walked back to his daughter. "Anybody see anything?" he said. "I don't know." "Ask around." "Yes, sir." "Anybody you think done this?" Sorrel looked at her father. She did not say the name, because she did not have proof. Because if she said the name and she was wrong, it would break something in her father that could not be fixed. Because Ward Callister had held Rennick up at Elspeth's funeral, and Rennick would not survive believing that Ward had done this. "No, sir," Sorrel said. "I don't know." Rennick looked at her for a long time. He knew she was lying. He knew what she was protecting him from. He did not push it. He said one thing. "Plant them back." "Yes, sir." "All of them." "Yes, sir." "Today." "Yes, sir." He walked away. Fiora waited until he was out of earshot. Then she said, "You know who done it." "I have an idea." "Ward." "Grandma." "Say his name if you know it." "I don't have proof." "You don't need proof. You need to know." Sorrel looked at her grandmother. Fiora's eyes were sharp as a hawk's. "Yes," Sorrel said. "It was Ward. Or somebody he sent. Or somebody he sent." Fiora nodded. Then she said the thing that changed everything. "Then we do not plant them back. We weave them together, living, all of them, so that if he comes again with his truck, he will find not a row of sticks but a hedge, a wall, a thing that fights back." Sorrel stared at her. "Grandma, I don't know how to do that. Not on that scale. The living hinge is one thing, but you're talking about hundreds of joins, thousands maybe. Then I will teach you, every day, until you know." "When?" "Now." "Grandma, your hip." "My hip has been dying for 11 years. It can die a few more months. Come, bring me the camp stool." They worked all day. Fiora sat on the camp stool with a wool blanket over her knees, and she directed. Sorrel and Delphi did the labor. Delphi had shown up at 2:40 with her school bag still on her back. She had taken one look at Sorrel's face and had known something was wrong. She had put down her bag. She had put on her gloves. She had gotten to work. They did not just replace the 43 destroyed cuttings. They started weaving. Not one row anymore. 2 rows, parallel, 12 inches apart, and every third stake was bent inward and lashed to the stake across from it. A living X, a living hinge. By dark, they had woven 15 meters. By the end of the week, they had woven 90. The hedge was starting to look like something. Not a wall yet, but the beginning of a wall. A thing you could see from the county road and wonder what it was going to become. Ward Callister drove past on Sunday afternoon. He slowed his truck. He did not stop. Sorrel saw him. She did not wave. He drove on. The letter arrived on Wednesday. Not from the water board this time. From the county planning office. Ordinance 47B. Effective immediately. No living or dead vegetation structure exceeding 2 meters in height was to be permitted within 20 meters of any designated waterway in Barefoot County. Violators had 45 days to comply. After that, fines, removal at owner expense, possible seizure. The living hedge in some places was already brushing 2.4 meters. The signature at the bottom of the ordinance was Ward Callister's, Chairman, Barefoot County Water and Erosion Control Board. Sorrel read the letter twice. She set it down. She looked at her father across the kitchen table. Rennick was looking at her. He had already read it. He said one thing. "You going to stop?" "No, sir." "Didn't think so." He picked up his coffee. He drank. He said nothing else. But that night, when Sorrel was walking down the hallway to her bedroom, she saw him standing in the doorway of her mother's old sewing room. The door was open. The light was on. He was standing in the middle of the room with a photograph in his hand. The photograph was of Elspeth, standing at the riverbank, in summer, in a yellow dress, laughing at something the camera could not see. Rennick was looking at the picture. He did not see Sorrel. Sorrel did not stop. She kept walking. She got into her bedroom. She closed the door. She sat down on her bed. And she cried. Because she was starting to understand. Her father was not fighting her. Her father was fighting her mother's ghost. And he was losing. And he was not sure whether losing was going to break him or save him. Delphi spoke on the first Saturday in April. They had been working together for 2 months. They were tying a bark lashing on a particularly stubborn hinge. Sorrel's hand slipped. The knife she was using to strip the bark bit into the meat of her palm. She hissed. She jerked her hand back. Blood welled up. A lot of blood. The kind of cut that was going to need stitches. Sorrel said a word her grandmother would have washed her mouth out for. Then she said, "I don't have anything to wrap it with." And Delphi said, very clearly, very quietly, "I do." Sorrel froze. She did not move. She did not look at Delphi. She was afraid if she looked at Delphi, she would frighten her back into silence. Delphi was already digging in her school bag. She pulled out a small white kit. She opened it. She took out a gauze pad and a roll of tape and a tube of antibiotic ointment. She took Sorrel's hand, very gently. She cleaned the cut with the sleeve of her sweater. She smeared on ointment. She pressed the gauze against the wound. She wrapped the tape around it. Neat, even, professional. She let go of Sorrel's hand. She said, "You should get stitches." Sorrel looked at her. Delphi looked back. Her eyes were the color of river bottoms, dark and quiet and old. "Delphi," Sorrel said. "Yes." "You talked." "I know." "Why now?" Delphi looked at Sorrel's bandaged hand. She looked at the willows. She looked at the river. "Because you needed me to," she said. That was all she said. She picked up the bark strip they had been working on. She went back to the hinge. She waited for Sorrel to help her. Sorrel wiped her eyes. She got up. She limped over. They finished the lashing together. Sorrel did not tell anyone. Not right away. Not her grandmother. Not her father. Not Mariah. Because that felt like Delphi's story to tell, not hers. But Delphi kept talking. A little more each week. Short sentences at first. "Pass me the twine. This one is dying. Look at the killdeer." Then longer ones. Then whole conversations. Then a laugh. A single sharp, bright laugh at something Sorrel said about a stubborn Angus cow that had gotten stuck in a fence. Mariah Thistlewood called Fiora on the phone the day Delphi laughed. Mariah was crying. Mariah Thistlewood did not cry, but she was crying that day. Fiora set down the phone very gently, and she walked into the kitchen, and she said to her granddaughter, "You have done something I did not know a person could do." Sorrel said, "I didn't do anything," Fiora said. "That is exactly how you did it." May came. The willows exploded. That was the only word for it. 1 week the stakes were bare gray sticks with tight green buds. The next week the buds had opened. The next week after that, the whole hedge was covered in slender, pale green leaves that trembled in the wind like they were breathing. The living hinges were fusing. You could see where 2 branches had been lashed together in March and had now begun to knit into each other. A bulge, a swelling, a single continuous piece of wood forming across the join. The roots below the surface were spreading. Sorrel could not see them, but she could feel them. The bank was firmer under her boots. The mud did not squish the way it used to. Something was holding. The hedge in most places was now 2.5 meters tall, which meant it was in violation of Ordinance 47B, which had a compliance deadline of May 22nd, which was in 3 weeks. Sorrel was standing at the Willows on a Thursday afternoon when her father came down the slope. She had not seen him come down the slope in 3 months. He walked all the way to the hedge. He stood beside her. He looked at the willows. He touched one, ran his rough thumb along the bark, pulled at a leaf, let it snap back. Then he said, "It's holding." "Yes, sir." "I was down here yesterday, in the middle stretch, where you started. I saw the footprints. I stood on the top of the bank. I bounced. Just my weight. The mud didn't move." "No, sir." "2 years ago it would have moved." "Yes, sir." Rennick was quiet. Then he said, "Your mother would be laughing at me right now." Sorrel looked at him. "Sir." "She would. She would say, 'Rennick Kinney, you are a stubborn son of a bitch, and it took you 3 years to see what your daughter was doing, and I'm going to laugh at you about this from heaven for the rest of your life.'" Sorrel smiled. She could not help it. Rennick did not smile back, but something in his face softened. Something moved. Then he said, "Girl." "Yes, sir." "Ward Callister is coming here tomorrow morning, with a survey crew, and a bulldozer." Sorrel went cold. "For what?" "To measure, to document the violation. If the hedge is over the height limit, he can start proceedings to remove it. He'll need a court order for that, but he can start proceedings." "Daddy?" "Yes." "What do I do?" Rennick looked at his daughter. He looked at her for a long time. Then he said something Sorrel had never in her life expected to hear come out of his mouth. "You stand your ground, and I stand with you." She could not breathe. He turned. He walked back up the slope. He did not look back. Sorrel stood at the riverbank with the wind in the willows. She was crying. She did not try to stop. The bulldozer arrived at 7:40 in the morning. The survey crew arrived at 8. Ward Callister arrived at 8:15. He was wearing his best canvas coat and a clean wool cap, and he had brought a briefcase, which was strange because Ward had never used a briefcase in his life. Sorrel saw all of this from the top of the slope where she was standing with her father on one side and her grandmother on the other, and Delphi behind her holding the leash of Mariah Thistlewood's ancient blue heeler dog. The dog was there because Delphi had insisted. Delphi was there because she had insisted. Fiora was there because nobody could have kept her home. Rennick was there because he had said he would be. The survey crew set up their equipment along the county road. Ward walked down toward the hedge. Rennick walked down to meet him. Sorrel walked down beside her father. They met in the middle of the pasture, halfway between the county road and the river. Ward stopped 6 feet away. Rennick stopped opposite him. "Ward." "Rennick, you come to take my daughter's work down. I come to measure it. That's all. Today. And tomorrow. Tomorrow the county attorney will make a decision. About my land. About the ordinance. Which is about my land." Ward looked at his oldest friend. Ward's face did something Sorrel did not expect. It flinched. For just a second. Very small. Very controlled. Then he said, "Rennick, please." "Please what?" "Please don't make me do this. You're not being made to do anything. You wrote the ordinance. For the whole county. For my daughter." Ward was silent. Then he said, "I love this family. You know I love this family." Rennick did not answer. Sorrel stepped forward. "Mr. Callister." Ward turned to her. "Yes, honey." "I want to show you something." Ward looked at her. "Show me what?" "Come and stand on the bank, the middle bank, where the hedge is tallest." "Sorrel." "Please." Ward hesitated. Then he walked with her. They walked in silence. Rennick followed a few steps behind. Fiora watched from the top of the slope. Delphi held the dog. The survey crew watched from the county road with their theodolites idle. Sorrel and Ward reached the middle of the willow stretch. Sorrel stopped. She pointed at the bank. "Bounce," she said. "What?" "Bounce. On your feet. Not gentle. Bounce like you would if you were testing a floorboard." Ward looked at her. Then he did it. He was not a small man. He weighed 230 pounds. He put his weight into it. He bounced hard. The bank did not move. He bounced again. The mud stayed firm under his boots. He looked down. He knelt. He put his palm against the ground. He pressed. He stood up slowly. Sorrel was watching him. "This is what I've been building," she said. "Not a wall, a net, a root system. This bank is holding because those roots have grown together underneath, and they are all pulling in different directions and against each other. When the water rises, the pressure will hit the roots and the roots will hold. They will bend, but they will not break, because they are alive." Ward said nothing. "The concrete you're planning to put here," Sorrel said, "it will make this bank higher. It will make it look stronger. But when the water rises, it will hit the wall, and it will have nowhere to go, and it will rise faster. And when it goes over the top or breaks through underneath, it will take everything behind it, because there won't be any roots left, because you'll have killed them all to pour the wall." Ward was staring at her. "Somebody taught you this," he said. "Yes." "Who?" "My great-great-great-grandmother. In Somerset. 300 years ago. And my grandmother. And my mother, who never got to finish." Ward's face did something else, something more painful than the flinch. He looked away. He looked at the river. Then he said something very quiet. "Sorrel, I have to do my job. I have written this ordinance. The board voted. There is a compliance deadline. If I do not enforce it, I will lose my seat on the board, and somebody else will enforce it, and that somebody will not care about you, or your daddy, or your grandmother. I care. That is why it has to be me." "Mr. Callister?" "Yes." "Then take my measurement, and go." Ward looked at her. He nodded. He walked back to the survey crew. They measured. The tallest point of the hedge came in at 2.6 meters. Ward signed the paperwork. He got in his truck. He drove away. The survey crew packed up. The bulldozer rumbled off down the county road. Sorrel stood at the top of the slope with her father on one side and her grandmother on the other, and Delphi behind her holding the dog. Nobody said anything for a long time. Then Rennick said, "He didn't want to." "No, sir." "He's scared of something." "Yes, sir." "You know what? I have an idea, but I need to be sure." "Then be sure, and come tell me." Sorrel nodded. She would go see Idella Callister on Monday. She did not know what she was going to find. Idella Callister opened the door on Monday afternoon and did not look surprised to see Sorrel standing on her porch. "Come in, honey." "Ma'am?" "I've been waiting for you." "Ma'am?" "For about 6 months. Come on." Sorrel followed her into the house. It smelled like beeswax and old paper and something baking. The floors were oak. The rugs were braided. There was a grandfather clock in the hall ticking the way grandfather clocks tick when they have been ticking for 100 years. Idella was 71. She had been married to Ward for 49 of those years. She wore a lavender cardigan, and her white hair was pinned up in a low knot at the back of her neck, and she moved like a woman who had learned somewhere young that fast movements startled people. She led Sorrel down the hall. She opened the door to Ward's study. She turned on the lamp. "There," she said. She pointed at the wall. Sorrel looked. A photograph. Black and white, framed in dark wood. 3 figures at the edge of a summer river. A tall, thin young man with his hair slicked back. Sorrel recognized him. That was her father at 20. Beside him, another young man brought her laughing. That was Ward. And between them, a boy, maybe 10 years old, skinny, freckled, holding a fishing rod that was too big for him, grinning at the camera like the whole world was his. "That's Merrick," Idella said. "Yes, ma'am." "He was Ward's little brother." "Yes, ma'am." "He drowned in the flood of 1957. He was 10. Ward was 20. Rennick was there too. He saw it happen. Nobody talks about it. Not one of them. Not in almost 33 years. Sorrel could not move. Idella walked to the desk. She sat down in her husband's chair. She folded her hands. Ward swam out, she said. The Redstone was 15 feet over flood stage. It was raining sideways. Merrick had climbed a tree to get away from the water. The tree came down. Ward tried to reach him. He got within 20 feet. The current took him under. He came up a quarter-mile downstream. Rennick and 2 other men pulled him out. Merrick was never found. Idella looked up. My husband has spent 33 years trying to build a wall along that river so no other little brother has to climb a tree in a flood. Sorrel could not breathe. Ma'am? Yes. He wasn't trying to hurt me. No, honey. He was trying to save you. From what? From the wrong thing. Sorrel sat down. She had not been invited to sit down. She sat down anyway, because her legs would not hold her. Idella watched her. You see now, Idella said. I see. So what? So what are you going to do? Sorrel looked at the photograph. The little boy with the fishing rod grinned back at her. She thought about him climbing a tree in a rising river. She thought about her mother in a hospital bed writing a letter she would never see finished. She thought about her grandmother's hands teaching her a knot in the cold. She thought about Delphi saying you should get stitches. She thought about Ward standing on the bank saying, "Don't make me do this." I don't know, she said. Idella nodded. That's honest. Ma'am? Yes. Please don't tell him I came. I won't, honey. Thank you. But I want you to know something. Yes, ma'am. He hasn't slept a full night in 33 years, and he doesn't know that I know. And I have loved him through every one of those nights, and I have hated him a little too. Because a man who cannot forgive himself for what he could not have done at 20 years old is a man who eats his own house from the inside. Sorrel looked at her. So do what you think is right, and when the river takes his wall down, don't gloat. Do you hear me? Don't gloat. Because what will be dying in that moment is not just his concrete. It is a 10-year-old boy who has been drowning in Ward Callister for 33 years, and you will be the one who let him go. Sorrel could not speak. She nodded. Idella walked her to the door. At the door, Idella held her arm for one moment. You are your mother made over, she said. Just so you know. Then she closed the door. Sorrel walked back to her father's truck in the driveway. She did not remember driving home. She only remembered stopping in the middle of the county road and pulling over onto the gravel and putting her forehead against the steering wheel and sitting there for 20 minutes. The rain started on Tuesday afternoon. Not hard at first, just a fine gray falling. The kind of rain that soaked into your coat before you noticed you were wet. By Tuesday night it was steady. By Wednesday morning it had not stopped. Sorrel walked down to the river at dawn. The Redstone was already 3 feet higher than the day before. Not dangerous yet, but moving faster. Chocolate brown, carrying sticks and a dead possum and a tangle of baling twine. She walked the length of the willow hedge. She touched every 20 feet, feeling the give, feeling the root tension. The hedge felt ready. She hoped. She went back to the house. She said nothing at breakfast. Rennick said nothing either, but he had the radio on. The weather station. And he had a paper map of the county spread out on the kitchen table, and he was drawing little circles with a pencil on all the low crossings and the bridges that were going to go under first. Fiora made biscuits. She served coffee. She said one thing. The killdeer have moved. Rennick looked up. Where? Up the ridge. All of them. 3 days ago. I did not want to say. Rennick nodded slowly. He looked at his daughter. Sorrel. Yes, sir. How long has it been since the killdeer moved before a flood? 1993. That I know of. Grandma told me. And 1972. Yes, sir. She told me that too. Rennick folded the map. Then it's going to be bad. Yes, sir. He walked to the phone. He called the Thistlewood house. He asked for Mariah. He asked her if she and Delphi wanted to come stay in the upstairs bedroom, because the Thistlewood house was in the low bottoms, because if the river jumped its banks it would be underwater by Friday, because Mariah was 71 and she was raising a 15-year-old girl, and Rennick Kinney was not going to let them ride out a 100-year flood in a house with rising water in the basement. Mariah said no. Mariah said she and Delphi would drive out on Thursday morning before the rain got worse, head up to her sister's place in Louisville, ride it out there. Rennick said good. Rennick hung up. He looked at his daughter. "Pack a bag," he said. "You and Grandma. We're going up to your uncle's place tomorrow, on the ridge." "Daddy?" "No arguing." "Daddy, I'm not going." "Sorrel." "I'm not going. I'm not leaving them." "Them. The Willows." Rennick stared at her. "Girl, I know what you are going to say." "You do not know what I am going to say." "You are going to say the willows are just trees." "No. No. I was going to say, if you are staying, I am staying with you." Sorrel looked at her father. Rennick did not blink. Fiora set down her rolling pin. "Then I am staying too," Fiora said. "Mama." "Rennick Kinney, do not tell me what I can and cannot do in my own son's house." "Mama, the water. The water will do what the water will do, and I am not going to spend my last flood watching it on a television in Louisville. Now sit down, drink your coffee. It is getting cold." Rennick sat down. He drank his coffee. He did not argue. By Thursday afternoon, the Redstone was 7 feet over flood stage. By Thursday night, it was 9. By Friday morning, the water was in the south pasture. Not deep, just a slow, brown creep across the low field, coming toward the house, coming toward the barn. Sorrel stood at the upstairs window. Rennick stood beside her. They watched the water. The willow hedge was submerged from the base to about a meter up. The tops were still showing. The tops were still green. Rennick said, "It's working. So far." "Girl?" "Yes, sir." "I want you to know something." "Yes, sir." "I was wrong. About all of it. About you. About your mother. About what she was trying to do here. About what you were trying to do here. I was wrong." Sorrel did not answer. She put her hand on her father's arm. He put his hand on hers. They stood at the window and watched the flood. Behind them, Fiora was making sandwiches. Because you make sandwiches when the world is ending. Because that is what women in Barefoot County had always done. At 3 in the morning on Saturday, the CB radio crackled. Rennick had brought it up from the barn. He had been listening on and off through the night. Most of what came through was static. Emergency channels. A couple of neighbors checking on each other. A truck driver stranded on the highway. Then at 3:02, the voice came through clear. "My truck by the low bridge. Man in it. Water rising. Anybody near the Redstone crossing at Callister Lane." Rennick sat up. He grabbed the microphone. "This is Kinney. What man?" "Ident said it was Ward Callister." Truck went off the crossing. "He got out. He's holding on to the guardrail. Water is up to his chest and rising. Nobody can get to him. The road is out both ways." Rennick went white. He looked at Sorrel. Sorrel was already pulling on her boots. Rennick said, "Girl, no. Daddy, yes. The current will take you. The current will take him. We can get there through the pasture. The pasture road is above the flood. We can put the John boat in above the bridge and drift down. The willows will hold us." "The willows?" "Yes. Trust me." Rennick looked at her. He looked at his mother. Fiora had come to the top of the stairs in her nightgown. Fiora said one thing. "Go." Rennick put on his boots. They loaded the John boat into the back of the pickup. They drove up the pasture road with the wipers going full. The rain was coming down in sheets. The headlights only reached about 15 feet ahead. They got to the top of the pasture above the flooded south field. They pushed the boat down the slope. They got in. Rennick took the paddle. Sorrel took the rope. Her father had put a coil of it in the boat. 50 feet of good hemp. She tied one end around her waist and knotted it 3 times. They pushed off. The current was fast. Faster than Sorrel had expected. The boat spun once and Rennick got it straight. They drifted down through the flooded pasture toward the county road, toward the low bridge. The willow hedge was a dark line ahead of them, barely visible above the waterline, the tops of the branches breaking the current. Sorrel steered them toward it. "Daddy, grab a limb. The big one on the left. Tie us to it." Rennick grabbed. He got his hand on a willow trunk. Sorrel handed him the other end of the rope. He looped it. He tied it fast. The boat held. They were anchored. Now they were a fixed point in the flood. Sorrel scanned the darkness. She could see the bridge 50 yards downstream. She could see something white bobbing in the water. She could see the guardrail. She could see a shape clinging to the guardrail. "Ward!" she yelled. Nothing. "Ward Callister." A face turned toward her. Pale, slack, exhausted. "Ward, hold on. We are coming." Rennick and Sorrel used the rope. Sorrel gave her father the anchored end. Rennick paid it out slowly. Sorrel and the boat drifted toward Ward. The current pulled hard. The rope went taut. The willow trunk on the bank creaked, but it did not give. The boat reached the bridge. Ward was half in the water. His arms were around the guardrail. His face was gray. His lips were blue. Sorrel reached down. "Ward, give me your hand." He looked up at her. His eyes did not focus at first. Then they did. "Sorrel." "Yes." "Sorrel Kinney." "Yes. Give me your hand." "I can't." "You can." "My hands are frozen. I can't let go." "Ward." "Yes." "I have got you. I have got you. My daddy has got the rope. The rope is tied to a willow. Do you hear me? Now let go." Ward looked at her. Something changed in his face. Something very old. He let go of the guardrail. He grabbed her hand. She pulled. He was heavy. 230 pounds of wet man. She could not have done it alone. She screamed for her father. Rennick pulled the rope hand over hand, and the boat came back toward the bank. Sorrel held on to Ward with both hands. He was dragging in the water beside the boat. She would not let go. Her father pulled them in. They got Ward into the boat. Rennick took off his own jacket and put it around Ward's shoulders. Sorrel took off her scarf and wrapped Ward's blue hands. Ward was shivering so hard the whole boat was shaking. He looked up at Sorrel. He said one thing. "I couldn't reach him." "Who?" "Merrick. I couldn't reach him." "Ward." "I tried." "I know." "I have been trying for 33 years." "I know." "I couldn't reach him, and I have been trying to build the wall so nobody else." "Ward." "So nobody else." "Sorrel." "Nobody else." "You didn't fail him." "I did." "You didn't. You were 20 years old, and the current was too strong. That's not failing. That's the river." Ward put his face in his hands. He made a sound Sorrel had never heard a grown man make before. She sat down beside him in the boat. She put her arm around him. She did not say anything else. Her father was steering them back through the flood. The willow hedge was on their right, dark and green and holding the whole flooded pasture together like a spine. Rennick looked at his daughter over Ward's bowed head. Rennick's eyes were wet. Sorrel had never seen her father cry. She did not stare. She looked at the willows instead. By Saturday afternoon, the rain had stopped. By Sunday morning, the water had begun to fall. By Monday morning, the county was surveying the damage. The Callister farm had lost about 45% of its topsoil in the stretch where the new concrete had been poured. The concrete had cracked in 5 places. The stretches behind the concrete had scoured out in long, ugly gouges that would take years to repair. Rufus Dinkins had lost most of his hay meadow. The Barlow farm had lost 60 feet of bank. 3 other farms had significant erosion. The Kinney farm had not lost a single meter. The hedge was bent. covered in mud, some limbs broken, some hinges pulled, but the hedge stood, and the ground behind it was untouched. A photographer from the county paper came out on Monday afternoon. He took pictures of the Callister concrete. He took pictures of the Kinney willows. He took a picture of Sorrel standing in the middle of the hedge with her muddy jeans and her old canvas coat and her hair blown sideways. The pictures ran on the front page on Wednesday. The headline was 2 words: Nature Held. By the end of the week, the story had been picked up by the Lexington Herald Leader. By the end of the month, it had been reprinted in 3 regional magazines. A researcher from the University of Kentucky drove out on a Saturday to walk the Willow line with her notebook. The whole thing rolled forward. Sorrel did not pay much attention. She was busy. She was replanting the 74 cuttings the flood had torn out. She was pruning the broken limbs. She was retying the hinges that had come loose. She was teaching Delphi how to strip bark. She was teaching 4 new kids from town who had shown up at the riverbank on a Tuesday afternoon after school and had asked politely if they could help. She was very tired. She was very happy. She was still a little worried about Ward. Ward had been in the hospital for 3 days after the flood. Pneumonia, exhaustion, hypothermia. When they let him go home, he did not go back to work. He resigned from the board on the following Monday. He gave no reason. He gave no interview. He drove home, and he did not come out of his house for 2 weeks. Idella called Sorrel on the 3rd Thursday. Idella said, "He is asking for you." "Ma'am." "He is asking to see you." "Yes, ma'am. He is not doing well, but he is trying. Please come." Sorrel drove out that afternoon. Ward was in the sunroom at the back of the house. He was sitting in a wicker chair with a wool blanket over his knees. He was 52 years old, and he looked 70. His hair had gone gray at the temples in 3 weeks, but his eyes were clear, clearer than they had been at the riverbank, clearer than they had been in the photograph. Sorrel sat down opposite him. Idella brought tea. Idella left. Ward looked at Sorrel for a long time. Then he said, "I am sorry. I know. I don't just mean about the Willows. I mean about everything. I mean about every ordinance I ever wrote. I mean about the concrete. I mean about the truck I sent through your plantings in March." Sorrel did not answer. "It was me," he said. "Not somebody I sent. Me. I drove it. At 2 in the morning. I don't know why. I could not stand the idea of you being right. Because if you were right, then I had been wrong. And if I had been wrong, then I had. He could not finish. Sorrel said, "You had been trying to save Merrick with the wrong tool." Ward looked at her. Something broke inside his face. "Yes. You couldn't save him with concrete." "No. You couldn't have saved him with Willows either." "No. You couldn't have saved him at all." Ward put his face in his hands. Sorrel got up. She walked around the little tea table. She knelt down in front of the wicker chair. She took Ward's hands away from his face. She held them. She said, "You were 20 years old. He was 10. The water was 15 feet over flood. You went in after him. That is not the story of a man who failed his brother. That is the story of a man who loved his brother more than he loved his own life. And it is time to let the 10-year-old boy go, because he does not want to be carried anymore. He wants you to put him down, so you can breathe, so you can sleep, so you can spend whatever years you have left being alive instead of drowning." Ward was crying. He was crying the way a man cries when he has been holding his breath for 33 years, and finally lets it out. Sorrel held his hands. She did not let go. Behind them at the door, Idella was watching. Idella was crying too, but Idella was smiling. Fiora Kinney died on a Tuesday in July. Peacefully, in her bed, in the middle of the afternoon nap she had been taking every afternoon for 8 weeks since the flood. She simply did not wake up. Rennick found her. He came downstairs into the kitchen where Sorrel was washing dishes, and he stood in the doorway, and Sorrel turned around, and she knew before he opened his mouth. She dried her hands. She walked upstairs. She sat on the edge of her grandmother's bed. She held her grandmother's hand. It was still warm. There was a piece of paper on the nightstand, Fiora's handwriting, small and slanted and neat. "Thank you for finishing it." That was all. Sorrel folded the paper. She put it in her pocket. She kissed her grandmother's forehead. She said goodbye. Then she went downstairs and she made the phone calls that had to be made. Because that was what farm women did. They made the phone calls. The funeral was on Friday. Half the county came. Ward Callister came. Ward stood at the back of the church and he did not sit down. He held his hat in his hands. He looked at the front where Sorrel sat with her father and where Delphi and Mariah sat behind them. After the service, Ward walked up to Sorrel. He said, "Your grandmother taught me how to whistle." "Sir, when I was 7, she and my mother were friends. She sat me on her porch one afternoon, and she taught me. She was patient with me. I could not do it for 2 hours. She would not let me quit. She said, 'You are going to whistle before you go home tonight, or my name is not Fiora Kinney.' And I whistled, and I ran all the way home to tell my brother, and Merrick could not whistle for 2 more years and it drove him crazy." Sorrel started to cry. Ward took her hand. He whistled, a soft low note, two-tone, like a bird. He looked at her. "Your grandmother taught me that. I have not whistled it in 33 years. I whistled it this morning, when I woke up, before I remembered why." Sorrel could not speak. Ward squeezed her hand. He walked away. That night, Sorrel sat on the porch of her house alone. Her father was asleep. He had cried himself out and he had gone to bed at 9, and she had heard him fall asleep almost immediately. He had not slept that soundly in years. Sorrel sat on the porch with a mug of tea. She looked at the sky. She could see the willow hedge from the porch, a dark green line along the river, taller than a man, taller than 2 men in some places. She would keep growing it. She would train the tops into the vaulted arches her grandmother had drawn in the notebook. She would make it into what the women in Somerset had made 300 years ago, something like a cathedral, something you could walk into and stand under and feel small. But it would take years. That was fine. She had time. She was 18. She had gotten a letter last week from the University of Kentucky. A professor of environmental science had read the article about her in the Herald Leader. He was offering her a full scholarship. Fall semester. She could major in whatever she wanted. Come and go as she needed. Come home every weekend if she needed to. She had not answered the letter yet. She thought she would say yes, but only if she could keep coming home. She heard a footstep behind her. Rennick came out onto the porch. He had a mug of tea in his hand, too. He sat down on the step beside her. They sat in silence. Then he said, "Your mother would be so proud of you." "I know." "Grandma would be too." "I know that." "And the woman in Somerset, 300 years ago." Sorrel smiled. "Yes, her too." Rennick was quiet. Then he said, "Girl." "Yes, sir." "I have not been a good father to you, not since your mother died. I have not been anything like a good father. I have been a scared man who could not look at his own daughter because she looked too much like the woman he lost. And I have been sorry. I have been sorry for 4 years. I have not known how to say it. I want to say it now. I am sorry." Sorrel put down her tea. She turned. She put her arms around her father. He put his arms around her. They sat like that on the porch for a long time. The willows were dark against the river. The killdeer had come back to the bank 2 weeks after the flood. They were nesting in the mud again. Fiora had lived to see them return. She had said one thing when Sorrel came in and told her. Good. The river is a river again. That was what a river was, when it was healthy. It was a place where killdeer came back to nest, where the bank held, where a girl could plant a hedge her great-grandmother would have recognized, where an old man could finally set down a burden he had been carrying since he was 20 years old. Sorrel sat on the porch with her father. She listened to the frogs. She watched the fireflies come up out of the tall grass along the fence line. Her father put his hand on her shoulder. The river ran on. The night was warm. Somewhere down along the bank a killdeer called out once. Sharp, bright, alive, and Sorrel Kinney closed her eyes, and she smiled.